Gravity is a fundamental force of the universe, and usually it's a pretty nice thing to have around. But if you're a pilot, an astronaut, a cart pusher, or, cliffhanger from Between the Lions, I guess, you've probably encountered some situations where it can be a real nuisance. I'm here to tell you you're in good company. Roger Babson was born on July 6, 1875 in Gloucester, Massachusetts. He was a promising kid, made it into MIT, and graduated with a degree in engineering. In 1904, he founded the Babson Statistical Organization, where he applied Newton's third law to economic forecasting. This was part of a wider obsession with Newton that would also lead him to buy and ship an entire room from Newton's last house to the U.S., and he also owned Newton's death mask and a bed he'd once slept in. Needless to say, despite having a lot of success in economic forecasting, as well as several regular business columns in major papers and magazines, a lot of people still thought he was a bit of a crackpot, especially in 1929 when he tried and failed to warn the world that the Roaring Twenties were about to come to a screeching halt. Other economists, including the popular Irving Fisher, wrote his warnings off. He said that thanks to modern innovations like mass production, the world would never have to worry about crashes again. Stocks would always be safe investments, and the economy would always be on the up and up. Various world leaders, including the president, chimed in to assure people that the economy was sound, despite increasing signs to the contrary. When the Depression hit, Babson's reputation skyrocketed, while the reputations of men like Irving Fisher made like the economy. Suddenly, Babson was just about the only respected economist, period, and he profited even in the Depression. The dude was a multimillionaire before the crash and remained so throughout its entire run. He had an unfathomable amount of wealth at a relatively young age, and he sure did use it. You're probably thinking about some Great Gatsby-type parties right now, but I wouldn't be talking about him if his story were so mundane. Anyone can throw a crazy party or build some weird sculptures, but only Roger Babson waged a war against the forces of gravity. He also commissioned some weird public art, to be clear. Specifically, he hired out-of-work stonecutters to carve inspiring messages into some boulders around Dogtown. The idea was to provide the impoverished Depression-era folk with hope and solid advice. It comes off to me more like a weird vanity project. Some are too generic to really mean anything. Others offer advice that probably would have been great prior to an unprecedented recession. Others still are without category. Help Mother. Any other eccentric rich dude, this would be his whole legacy. Just a guy with money who gave some unemployed stonecutters a weird but paying gig during tough times. Not Babson. In 1947, he lost his son to drowning, which rekindled the old trauma of losing his sister the same way as a child. Inspired by his grief, in 1948 he wrote an essay, Gravity, Our Number One Enemy. The title makes it sound exactly like a sci-fi radio show from 1948, but it's a totally sincere piece of writing. He recounts the loss of his sister, writing that it was gravity that pulled her to the bottom of the lake. He also informs us that gravity leads to millions of deaths yearly between drowning, falling, airplane crashes, and so on. In addition, he sees gravity as a source of numerous ailments, writing, broken hips and other broken bones, as well as numerous circulatory, intestinal, and other internal troubles are directly due to the people's inability to counteract gravity at a critical moment. Babson speculated on the existence of something called a partial insulator, a theoretical metal alloy which could partially block the effects of gravity. A few potential uses for the insulator included airplanes and shoes. In some wild alternate universe, this guy's probably remembered fondly as a hero among people with chronic leg pain. I'd love a pair of those shoes. Now, being phenomenally wealthy, our boy didn't really feel like putting a lot of effort into this gravity business. Instead, his strategy leaned more into paying other people to look into gravity for him. He bought out Invention Incorporated, a DC-based company, so he could consistently have a team of 3 people looking through filed patents for, quote, any machine, alloy, chemical, or formula which directly relates to the harnessing of gravity. In 1949, the president of Babson Reports, George Rideout, gave him another great idea. He could fuel research into gravity by offering rewards to promising essays on the subject. And thus, the Gravity Research Foundation was born, giving out cash prizes to the 5 best essays submitted in their yearly essay contests. The goal of the Foundation was, in short, to amass a large library of research on gravity, hoping that collecting everything we did know would help us fill in what we didn't know. But in 1949, only a few years after the first nuclear bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, gravity wasn't the only physical force on Babson's mind. He needed to ensure that the Foundation and its library would survive the most tangible, unignorable form of potential Armageddon man had ever witnessed. He chose to set up shop in New Boston and claimed in the Foundation's official pamphlet that this was because experts at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology advised a location which would be relatively free from damage should a bomb be dropped on Boston, Massachusetts, 65 miles away. The reality is he just drew a circle 60 miles wide around Boston on a map and chose New Boston basically at random. He was really serious about the whole surviving nuclear bombs thing, though. Take a look at this sign he's had installed on the edge of town. Property here should sell for 3 times its current price. That's an interesting way to put it. Well, here's the thing. Babson bought a lot of real estate in New Boston. Residents of the town hated him for a good while because he bought up damn near half the property and did nothing with most of it, letting a lot of it fall into disrepair. Ivan Gomez, a former employee of the Gravity Research Foundation, described many of his locations as feeling like a whim that never got finished. A lot of that has to do with Babson's constant uncertainty as to what exactly he wanted the Foundation to do. An undated flyer claims that they had plans at one point to build a full-on laboratory in the town, but decided against it as they wanted the Foundation to exist as a means of encouraging others to do their own research. In practice, this was the main purpose of the Foundation. Its yearly essay contests and gravity conventions attracted decent crowds and put New Boston on the map, making it more than just another small town. Conferences held yearly would attract upwards of 75 guests, most of whom would also end up spending money at local businesses. That would help to redeem Babson in the eyes of some, but not all, residents as the years went by. But frustration lingered. For one, he was never seen as a resident of the town, just an eccentric outsider who existed at the periphery. Sometimes a nuisance, sometimes a source of entertainment. Never particularly proactive, except when it came to proposing ideas for technology that could be created after anti-gravity had been achieved. According to several accounts, he was just a little too far out for small-town 50s America. These days, a lot of his sci-fi ideas are things a kid might know about thanks to the prevalence of speculative media and even science channels right here on YouTube. But back then, his proposals for perpetual motion machines or gravity-insulating shoes just felt like nothing more than the fever dreams of a kind, well-meaning, but ultimately out-of-touch rich man. My favorite anecdote involves Babson making guests sit on chairs in which their heads were placed lower than their feet as a means of demonstrating the pain gravity could inflict. This guy. To the world of physics, he was a shepherd. To the people of New Boston, he was a spectacle. It's no wonder, then, that the Gravity Research Foundation as it exists now is a far cry from Babson's original vision. No longer the front lines in a war on a fundamental law of physics, the Foundation has relocated to Wellesley, and its only function these days is the essay contest. Stephen Hawking won on 5 separate occasions, and the current first prize is $4,000. This is a big deal. An opportunity for physicists to get some recognition for their work and display it in short papers which, in theory, are more accessible than the sort of things they're used to writing. In theory is the key phrase there, because oh my god, these titles all terrify me. Some recent winners include The Cosmological Constant Problem in Brain Worlds and Gravitational Lorentz Violations, Proper Time Quantization of a Thin Shell, Lorentzian Quintessential Inflation, Euclidean Gravity and Holography. In the words of Stephen Hawking, this is a pretty prestigious competition among gravity researchers. I'd like to think Babson would have been satisfied with the modern Foundation, even if anti-gravity isn't the explicit focus. After all, knowing our number one enemy as intimately as these people do could yet turn out to be how we overcome it. I'm still young. According to my analytics, you're probably still young. We might see Babson's partial insulator realized in our lifetimes. But until that day, remember, therapy is probably a better option than blowing thousands of dollars on vague research into half-baked sci-fi technology. And help Mother.